What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 10 preview, where I'm going to go through some of the press conference updates we got yesterday and also answer some of your questions as well to hopefully help you with your decisions as we get closer to that Game Week 10 deadline. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button as we try and work our way towards 500,000 subscribers. Otherwise, let's get into it. Let's start with some information about Richarlison and Son from Ange Postecoglou, who held a press conference yesterday ahead of their Carabao Cup game tonight against Man City. So on Richarlison, he was asked about the idea of deploying Richarlison on the left as cover, and Ange said, "I think Richarlison has obviously played a lot of his football on the left, and he's definitely an option there for us and an option through the middle as well. He's getting some good match minutes now, so hopefully the next couple of weeks we've still got a good game schedule. Like I said, he's only just getting his season started, so the more we can expose him without overburdening him in the early stages, he'll be able to contribute even more." So I think for anyone that's worried about the minutes of Solanke and possibly Son when he's back fit, I'm not sure we're going to see Richarlison start important matches like Premier League ones at the moment, but I do think he could eat into their minutes off the bench. I think Richarlison at the moment is more going to be used during those kind of international games and stuff like that, and I wouldn't be completely surprised if he starts the Carabao Cup game tonight against Man City as well. So we know he can play on the left, we know he can play centrally. If Solanke starts performing really badly, maybe Richarlison will get a start, but I'm not convinced that will happen anytime soon. And I think it's worth remembering that managers aren't necessarily just looking for FPL points. Solanke can play well for Spurs without necessarily getting goals and assists. Obviously, he's going to want to get them, right? And hopefully that will happen for FPL over the next couple of fixtures. But I don't think he's likely to get dropped or anything like that over the next few weeks. So if you've got Solanke for Villa at home, Ipswich at home, again, like I said yesterday, I think he's a pretty good hold. On Son, he was asked whether he'll be fit to face Aston Villa in the Premier League on Sunday. He said Son is almost fit, so he's not quite fit yet, but probably from our perspective will aim for the weekend. So he's not going to play in the Carabao Cup game tonight by the looks of it. He then went on to say, "We're quite confident he'll be right for the weekend." So it is looking quite positive for Son starting against Aston Villa in Game Week 10. And we'll hear from Ange Postecoglou again on Friday. And I'm sure he'll give us a pretty good update. So if you're looking to hold on to Son, or you're not really wanting to transfer him out because you've got other stuff to deal with, it is looking pretty good. My only concern is he's played, like I said before, he's had 3 or 4 weeks out. And then, that's not Son, that's Solanke. He's had 3 or 4 weeks out injured over the international break and stuff. He comes back and plays 69 minutes. A week later, he then can't play against Crystal Palace. He's probably not going to play a part in the Carabao Cup either. And then they're pretty sure he's going to be right for the weekend. Now, how many minutes is he going to get against Aston Villa? Like, if you're considering selling Son to Saka or Palmer, how many minutes does he need to get in 10 and 11 to delay that move? Like, if he gets 60 minutes against Villa and then maybe 70 against Ipswich, is that better than Cole Palmer for 90 minutes against Man United and 90 minutes against Arsenal? Because unless Palmer is feeling something or got a small knock or something like that, he's not going to get subbed in these 2 games. That's the dilemma that I have for my own team, and I'm sure a lot of people have something similar. I'm leaning more towards keeping Son, and part of that is because it's 2 good home fixtures. And I know I've had a lot of Villa fans in my comment section yesterday. I'm not saying that Villa is an easy fixture, right? But it's not an Arsenal or a Liverpool or anything like that. And the fact that it's followed up by Ipswich at home is obviously such a big part. And he's a huge differential. And maybe it's just one last kind of gamble that he can beat someone like Palmer over 2 weeks. I'm not that confident in it, if I'm honest. But I think if there's a positive update on Friday again, I think we can assume that Son is going to start. Any doubts, I think he's probably got to go. So Mikel Arteta also held a press conference yesterday, and he was actually quite open in his answers. So I'm going to work from the bottom and go up. So on Calafiori, he said he's out for a few weeks. So for anyone out there that owns him, it's not looking great for game weeks 10 or 11. Just a quick reminder that we do have another international break between game weeks 11 and 12. So even if he's out for 3 to 4 weeks, he might be back by game week 12 for Forest at home. But for me, he would probably be someone to look to move on if you do have him. He's 5.8 million, so he's not super cheap. And also, when he comes back, he's not absolutely nailed in that back 4. I think long term, if all Arsenal defenders were fit, Calafiori would probably see pretty decent minutes. But you could see something like White, Saliba, Gabriel, if he's fit, and obviously Timber left back. Like, that could be a lineup in some games. So I think Calafiori's probably one to move on if you do have him. If you've got Timber, he said Urian is fine. He has been out for a while. He was tired. He could not continue in that game. So against Liverpool, he came off, but it was mostly just fatigue. I would expect to see him in the lineup as long as he doesn't pick up an injury in the meantime for game week 10. And then on Gabriel, he said we are still assessing him. It doesn't look bad at all, which is good news. It was much better the next day. He has done some tests. So we don't have any time frame for Gabriel or any confirmation when he might be back. And I would absolutely expect him to not be in the squad for the Carabao Cup game. But I think there is maybe, and maybe I'm just being way too optimistic, but maybe a chance that he's available this weekend. And I also think the fact that it's Newcastle away and Chelsea away means there's a bigger chance that he will be, I don't know, make himself available for these games. Like, they're not obviously going to push him if it's going to be something where he could get injured for a very long time. But if it's only a slight thing and he can play, you'd think for these kind of away games they would want him in, and then they maybe get him back sooner than they would if it was a bit of an easier opposition. So hopefully he's back for one of these two. My general thoughts right now, and I haven't got anything locked in, right, there's still a long time until the deadline, long enough anyway, is I want to keep him because I still believe from game week 12 onwards, if Arsenal can get everyone fit, there'll be a lot of clean sheets along the way. I just don't think that defence has got worse from last season where it was probably the best defence in the league. It's easily still top 3 for me. And I think because of his goal threat as well, I really want to give him every chance to start playing for me in FPL from 12 onwards. So I'm leaning towards keeping even if he misses 10 and 11. And if there's a chance he's back for even one of those games, then he's definitely going absolutely nowhere. And again, the international break between 11 and 12 is pretty helpful because you've got an extra couple of weeks for recovery. And I did see someone yesterday say to me, but he might go away with Brazil. That wouldn't be good. But actually, I think it would be quite good because that would show that he's fit. Obviously, if he goes and plays for Brazil and gets injured, that's not ideal. But if he comes through the international break unscathed, that would actually be quite nice to know that he was able to play a bit of football and then hopefully be available from 12 onwards. So it might be that he'll be assessed and do more tests and actually be out for ages. But right now, it's fairly positive. I don't know if he's going to definitely be back for game week 10, but hopefully from 12 onwards, he'll be available. And I still think he's going to be a great option. So in the press conference that Arne Slot had yesterday, he said that Diogo Jota is not expected back before the international break. So it looks pretty likely that he's going to miss at least game weeks 10 and 11. So if you are a Jota owner, it's probably time to look to move him on. Because if he's going to be out for the next 2 games, you're missing 2 back-to-back home games against Brighton and Villa, and then there's no guarantee that he would play against Southampton in game week 12 straight after the international break either. And then game week 13 is Man City at home anyway. And I just think although Jota is not super expensive, he is taking up a midfield slot and there's lots of good value midfield players. So I would probably look to move him on. Off the top of my head, if you're not looking to move up in price, like you haven't got money in the bank to go to like a Saka, Palmer or someone like that, then you're probably looking at the likes of Eze and Brennan Johnson, who I still think are pretty good picks moving forward. And for Crystal Palace in particular, I know that Eze has been absolutely terrible in terms of FPL returns, but the fixtures coming up are quite good. I think I mentioned it yesterday. Wolves away, Fulham at home, Villa away, Newcastle home, Ipswich away. Is not a bad 5 fixture run. Not perfect, but certainly not bad either. So him or Brennan Johnson, possibly like a Garnacho, that is probably where I would go down to. And if you don't have him, Burmo, you should probably do what you can to get him in. Obviously, the knock-on for Jota missing out is someone else has to play number 9. It's very likely to be Darwin Núñez for anyone looking for a very short-term punt. Some people have speculated that it could be like Diaz, Gakpo, Salah, and of course that is possible. But I think it's been pretty clear by how Arne Slot has lined up and made substitutions so far that it's Gakpo or Diaz for the left, it's Darwin or Jota through the middle. And I actually think Darwin's played okay in the games that he's featured in. He hasn't got a lot of returns, and actually his expected goals over the last 3 starts in the Premier League has been really bad. So it was 0xG against Arsenal, 0xG against Chelsea in 150 minutes, and then against Bournemouth in game week 3 where he got 71 minutes, it was 0.31. So that is a little bit concerning, but also it's a very small sample size, and Arsenal defence is great, even when it's missing Saliba. So I wouldn't be massively concerned about that. I will always consider Darwin Núñez when I think he's going to start, because I do think he's a solid option. And 7.1 million is not a bad price, and the next 3 fixtures are okay. I would just be worried that if Jota can get himself fit over the international break, that he might just start against Southampton, especially if Darwin Núñez has been away on international duty. And like, if you bring Darwin in for a 3-game week punt and he misses the Southampton game, well, that's just an absolute killer. And then you've got City anyway in game week 13. I'm just not convinced it's worth it. And also this season, we're contending with the fact that we can save up to 5 free transfers. The idea of taking these really short-term punts, it shouldn't be ignored, right? And you should absolutely do it if you think it's worth a lot of points. But you've got to be pretty confident in that because the transfers are going to be, useful later on. And I just think shorter-term punts are a little bit harder to justify at the moment. It's really got to go well in a short period of time. It's not like you've got to use your transfers or you lose it anymore. You can build up to 5. So I like Darwin. I think he's still a little bit underappreciated in general. I just think if you miss the Southampton game, that's just a rubbish punt, basically. He could do the damage against Brighton and Villa, but if he misses Southampton, it's just rubbish. And then game week 13, you're probably going to have to start to get rid, because as soon as Jota's back, he's probably going to be the first choice 9 unless Darwin Núñez plays absolutely, incredibly well. All right, let's get into some of your questions. So what are your thoughts on Fabiański over Areola in game week 9? Was it a one-off, or do we expect Fabiański to be the new number 1 now? So for anyone that missed it, Fabiański started ahead of Areola, who was on the bench for game week 9. And as far as we know, Areola wasn't injured or anything like that. The reality is we don't know who the number 1 is. Only Lopetegui does, and he's not going to tell us what his plans are moving forward. He's going to want to keep competition between those 2 goalkeepers. We would need to see a run of games until we're confident to say that Fabiański is the new number 1. I did hear, I think it was James on Planet FPL said he wasn't completely surprised to see Fabiański start. But I think the fact that Lopetegui is happy to make that change not too long in the season means he's probably not going to be too concerned if he has to switch it back at some point. So I think any plans to rush out and buy Fabiański as cover is probably not worth it. So for FPL, I think it's pretty simple. If you're someone like me who's already got Fabiański, then maybe you can consider playing him in games where West Ham have decent fixtures, because the only risk you run is that Areola starts and then picks up an injury and Fabiański has to come on, and he comes on for like a 1-pointer, which has happened already, by the way. Against Man City in game week 3, he came on at half-time. So it isn't completely out of the realms of possibility, but generally he's either going to start or he's not. So if you've got him, like this week, for example, some people are going to consider playing Fabiański instead of Raya. I'm probably still going to play Raya for what it's worth, but if you think West Ham are more likely to keep a clean sheet and you've got Fabiański, you just start him. If you're wildcarding this week or soon over the next couple of weeks, then Fabiański probably is the best backup goalkeeper, because there's not really a high chance that you're going to want 3 West Ham players outside of Fabiański anytime soon, and there's no other 4 million goalkeepers that are playing at the moment, so you might as well just go with Fabiański and hope that he keeps his place. And if he doesn't, know that Areola always seems to pick up injuries anyway, so at some point he might play for you. And if you don't have him, what's the concern? You've got a playing goalkeeper, you just play them instead. It is not worth bringing someone in that you're not even sure is number 1. So it's definitely interesting news for those of us that have him already or on wildcard. But for everyone else, I wouldn't really worry about it too much. There's no guarantee that he keeps his place. And even if he does start even the next 5, 6, 7, 8 games, who's to say that Areola doesn't come in at some point if Fabiański starts making mistakes? So when's the best time to wildcard? Is it the next international break? So I'll give the cliche answer first of all, and that is that it's going to be team dependent. And I say that because there's going to be some people watching that have got so many issues in their team right now that actually wildcarding in game week 10 might not be the worst call. Because for the most part, your wildcard is going to be centered around the premium players that you want. And whatever your decision is for the long term, like from game week 12 onwards after the next international break, those players are also good right now. So if you want Palmer, Saka, Haaland, or Palmer, Saka, Salah, or any combination of premiums, throw Son in the mix as well, whoever you pick right now is also going to be good from 12 onwards. So don't be afraid to use it now if you've got that many problems in your team. Otherwise, I think the 2 main windows that people are going to pick are probably game week 12 or not for a long time. Basically, either when they need it or close to the end of the window to use your first wildcard. We know that in game week 12, there's a few fixture swings. Primarily, the big ones are for Arsenal. So you miss Newcastle away, Chelsea away, and then from 12 onwards, you got Forest at home, West Ham away, Man United at home, Fulham away, Everton at home, etc. Right? The fixtures are just good for a long time. You can double or triple up, happy days. And obviously Chelsea as well. So if you're still sitting there like me without players like Cole Palmer, they've probably got to come in from game week 12. I think anyone going without him at that point really is asking for pain, basically. The fixtures for Chelsea from game week 12 all the way, I mean, almost for like forever, right? Pretty much they don't have a terrible run of fixtures for the rest of the season. But I'm not saying, obviously they've got tough fixtures in between, but not many. Like Spurs away in 15, City away in 23, Arsenal away in 29. Like, what other fixtures there scare you for their attackers? I would say none. I'm not saying it's always perfect, like Man City away in 23, Brighton away in 25, Villa away in 26. If you were buying Chelsea players in game week 23, that might not be ideal. It's so far away, who cares? The fixtures are great. So you're going to want Chelsea attackers, Palmer for sure, maybe Jackson, possibly a Chelsea defender as well. So game week 12 looks pretty good, but that's really going to depend again on, like, I think it's always nice on Wildcard to fix the periphery players, like your bench players, your 4.5 million defenders, and just be set for the long term. But a lot of it is going to come down to those big hitting premium players. So I think whether you Wildcard in 12 probably depends on how many transfers you've got now and which players you've got. If you're sat there with Saka, Palmer already and Haaland, there's probably not going to be a massive need to wildcard in game week 12 unless you're really low on like Arsenal players and you want to bring them back in. But it's probably not going to be like, there is a good fixture swing for Arsenal in 12, but it's not like you have to have a triple up if you don't have it. So it's going to depend on what your team looks like now, how close you can get it to that kind of more template wildcard in game week 12. Otherwise, you're just waiting for a while. Because I think for most people, whatever team you have in 12, bearing in mind you're constantly managing it to try and have the best team possible, it's probably going to be okay for a good number of weeks after that. We've spoken a lot already this week and last week about captaincy. Haaland is never going to be a bad choice, but if you've got Salah and Palmer instead, and even Saka thrown in as well, that covers you nicely for captaincy from now until kind of game weeks 18, 19, and maybe even longer. And so there's not going to ever be a massive need to wildcard. So you could, if you want to, take the risk, as some people will see it, on getting rid of Haaland now, you could use the wildcard as a, basically like a, I don't know what the word I'm trying to use is, but a backup that if it goes wrong, you can easily get him back in. People like me that are thinking about selling him are going to have to use multiple transfers to get him back. If you've got a wildcard in your back pocket, that's not a problem. So we know from 18 onwards in particular, the fixtures get really good for Man City over the space of the next 5 game weeks. Everton at home, Leicester away, West Ham at home, Brentford away, Ipswich away. And so Haaland in then might be a nice option. With a wildcard, obviously you can do it really easily. Is it nice to be wildcarding over Christmas because the game week 18 deadline is the 26th of December? Not necessarily, but there'll be content about it, right? You'll know roughly what team you want to put together. So that's what I would say. Maybe this week if you need it. 12 is going to be the next window that a lot of people use it in. Otherwise, I think you're really just waiting until your team really needs it, or possibly at the end of the wildcard 1 window, because obviously you've got to use it in the first half of the season, to maybe get players like Haaland back and maybe go for more Man City players at that point. But if you look at the fixture analyzer on Hub, and if you want to use this tool and all the other tools, as always, 7-day free trial, 30% off at the moment, links in the description below. You can go to certain game weeks and game week ranges, and you can just see where certain fixture swings are. So if I go for fixtures ordered by goals, and I go to like just a random week, like game week 14 to 22, who's at the top for the goals that are going to be scored? Arsenal, City, Liverpool. So if you've got Saka, Haaland, Salah, you've probably not, whatever, right? You're probably not going to have that combination, right? But Saka, Haaland, and then you've got Palmer. And by the way, Chelsea are in 5th place over this. Like, your premiums are set. You're just really messing around with the other players in your team. If you've got Salah, Saka, Palmer, it's exactly the same thing. And by the way, Spurs aren't that far behind, right? So there's not really an obvious window where it's going to make sense for a lot of people outside of 12 for those fixture swings I mentioned, or just later on. And you can pick any week, by the way, right? If I just go to 17 to 27, unsurprisingly, it's still Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City, Chelsea in the top 5. Villa and Spurs are never going to be that far behind because they're some of the best attacking teams out there. And yeah, I think even for even for the likes of players like Jackson, Watkins and Isak that I haven't mentioned a huge amount, most of their fixture swings are also in Game Week 12 as well. Like for Watkins, you've got Game Week 12, Palace at home, Chelsea away, Brentford at home, Southampton at home. Now, I think the fixtures after that, the next 4, are not that easy for him, but he's so consistent, he's going to be worth holding on to if you've not got a spare transfer. If not, you could jump onto someone else from Game Week 16 onwards. So from 16 to 19, for example, again, if I just order this by goals, who goes to the top here? I mean, Chelsea, so Jackson, you could go to Jackson from Watkins. If Solanke's doing really, really well, you could move to him. But like, there's not going to ever be a big need to do that. A lot of people said at the start of the season that the first wildcard this year is not going to be as important as maybe it has been in previous years. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I do think it's hard to find a window where it makes absolute sense that that's where you go. So that's a very long way of saying now 12 or just wing it for a bit. So regarding Spurs, I'm with you on the point to keep Solanke for Ipswich, but what are your thoughts on Maddison? His minutes are getting lower and I think a benching might be coming. So I did briefly mention Maddison at some point in yesterday's video to basically say that I would probably also keep him for Villa at home and Ipswich at home, but I didn't go into more detail than that. I probably stand by that opinion just because I think the Ipswich at home game is so good. But if I was a Maddison owner, I would be pretty worried. And I think my general opinion about him is there is no way I would buy him right now. And I think if you are an owner, you can probably make a case to hold him for 2 weeks because of that Ipswich game. But long term, I think he has to go because I agree at some point he might get benched. It's not a guarantee, but I think it is possible. He only got 45 minutes against West Ham and 61 against Palace. And last year, if you remember, and I hope I'm remembering this correctly, there was a period where James Maddison wasn't even starting. Now, I believe that was after an injury, but still, it shows that Ange is happy to play without him. There's some players that if they get an injury, as soon as they're back fit, they're back in the team. That wasn't the case with Maddison, and maybe it just took him a while to get up to speed. But I think the signs over the last couple of weeks are concerning, basically. So if you're sat there with a few transfers and you've got the luxury of moving him on, then maybe I would think about doing that because 7.6 million is not that cheap, and also he's taking up a midfield spot. But if you've sat there with one transfer, I'm not sure there's a massive amount you can do with Maddison. Like, obviously, you can move him on to like an Eze, a Johnson, or a Garnacho, but unless you're absolutely sure that that new player you're bringing in is someone that you want for the next 4 or 5 weeks, I think I'd rather just roll the transfer and hope that he starts again against Aston Villa. But at some point, you absolutely could see, like, I don't know, Bissouma and Sarr start together and one of Maddison or Kulusevski drop out. And I think the way that Kulusevski has been playing and the minutes that he's been getting, it doesn't seem likely that he's the one that drops out before Maddison. So there is definitely reason to be concerned. The Ipswich game would maybe make me lean more towards keeping him. Obviously, Spurs have got a Carabao Cup game tonight, so you can see what kind of team they put out. I think that Pep will rotate a bit, or at least make early substitutions. I think Ange might go quite strong. And so if Maddison's missing out tonight in a strong team, then yes, long term that's a worry. Although, then you could say he's been rested, so he might start against Aston Villa. So you can frame it however you want. I'll leave it there. I think Maddison I'd probably keep because of Ipswich. Long term, I would definitely have a plan to get rid, and I wouldn't buy him. So there's going to be a new manager bounce for Man United. Could their players be a good option now? Now, at the time of recording, all we know is that Ten Hag has been sacked, Ruud van Nistelrooy is interim manager, and no new full-time manager has been officially confirmed or anything like that. Now, I'm sure you've seen there's lots of chatter about Ruben Amorim becoming the new manager from Sporting, and that does look likely that it's going to happen, but it's not been confirmed yet. So it's hard to say for sure that you should be investing in Man United right now. The good news is, for anyone that doesn't have their players, there's probably not going to be a need for a massive rush to bring them in. They haven't been fantastic for a while. It's going to take time for a new manager to get their ideas implemented. And also, it's Chelsea at home this week. So even if Amorim was confirmed and in the dugout, would it really make a massive difference? Probably not. Now, new manager or not, I think Man United players could maybe be considered for investment anyway from 11 onwards because of the fixtures they've got. So it's Leicester at home in 11, Ipswich away in 12, and Everton at home in 13. They're just good fixtures for anyone. but it's only short term. After that, you've got Arsenal away, Forest at home, City away. So a bit like how I said with Darwin Núñez, like, yes, you've maybe got 3 good fixtures, but long term, not so good. It's similar with Man United. I just don't think there needs to be a rush to bring their players in. I mean, if you needed a new defender, you wanted like a Dalot, for example, at 5.1, then obviously you can play him for these 3 games and then just hide him on the bench. Maybe play him against Forest in game week 15, Bournemouth in 17, Southampton in 21, etc. You don't have to play him every week. But if it's an attacker, you want to be more confident in them. And I think with Bruno Fernandes, look, I still think he's been a little bit unlucky to get to only have 2 assists so far. He probably should have at least 1 or 2 more returns, but also he's 8.2 million. So you really need to be confident there's going to be a big uptick, and I'm not sure there's any point in bringing him in for 11 if you're just going to sell him again in 14. So I would wait and see what happens with the new manager being confirmed and what happens in the Chelsea game, first of all, because if it's another dire performance at home, how much confidence will you have over the next 3? The fixtures will play a big part, but I still think long term you're probably going to be struggling with Man United players, to be honest with you. If Amorim is the one that comes in as well, he's got a preference of playing with a back 3. Now, it doesn't mean he'll necessarily play that at Man United, but it's quite likely that he would want to do that, and that's also a big change in how Man United play. Now, it might be that he's such a good coach that he just comes in and straight away the players get it and they're creating chances, they're looking good, they're more defensively sound, but it is a big leap of faith, I would say. So if you were considering Man United players already because of the fixtures, maybe the fact there's a new manager will push you into that. If you've got Man United players like I do, there's probably no need to sell them anytime soon. Obviously, if you can make a big upgrade, like from Fernandes to Salah, that could still be worth it, or Fernandes to Palmer. But otherwise, there's no rush because of the next fixtures. For everyone else, I think you can probably just wait until game week 11 to make a decision. But they do have some quite nicely priced players. Like Garnacho at 6.2 is decent, I think. If Højlund's going to be the number 9 under Amorim, he could be good as well, 6.9. But again, are you willing to spend 6.9 when you can get Cunha for 6.5, Chris Wood for 6.4, Raul Jimenez for 5.7, players that are doing the business right now, and all of them have penalties as well. Højlund wouldn't, obviously. Fernandes would keep taking them. I'm just not sure it's massively worth it. I am going to consider a defender in game week 11 if I need one, because I think there's a lot of good home games, and Ipswich away is decent as well, and you can bench them for the tougher games. That's about it. I've still got a plan to sell Fernandes from kind of game weeks 12, 13 onwards. Well, who knows? Maybe the new manager will come in, they'll look amazing, and I'll keep him for ages. Who knows? But yeah, Man United will probably improve over the next few, but I think a lot of that will be down to fixtures as much as the new manager. So big at the back, is it worth the money? I think it probably is going to be long term, but I'm not 100% confident in that opinion right now. And it doesn't help that I can't even remember the last time that Arsenal got a clean sheet. I'm just going to double check here. So they got a clean sheet last in game week 4 against Spurs. So it's now 5 games in a row with 0 clean sheets. Obviously, Saliba missed the last game. Gabriel may or may not be injured. Calafiori's out at the moment. Doesn't look ideal at this point in time. But I still think with the fixtures they've got going forward, they will be decent. And personally, that's part of the reason I'm thinking about selling Haaland, to basically place that bet that long-term big at the back will be good and it'll be better than messing around with cheap defenders instead. Obviously, things can change quite quickly, and at this point in time, everybody wants to bring in someone like Ait-Nouri. He's got 3 goals already this season, 2 assists, so 5 attacking returns in 9 games. Great fixtures, super cheap price. At the moment, it doesn't look worth investing in those more expensive defenders, but often the players that are priced higher will be more consistent over a period of games, and that's kind of the gamble that I'm looking to take. I want to keep Raya, I want to keep Gabriel if he's fit, and I want to keep Trent, because I think over the next kind of 8 to 10 game weeks, the points will come, and I just won't have to mess around with my defence as long as they can stay fit. But to do that, I'm having to sacrifice Haaland, because I also want Palmer and Saka. So you've got to make your choice somewhere. For a lot of people, it will be to sacrifice the defence, and I don't mind that at all. Right now, that is working, and that could continue working longer term. I'm just willing to bet that that's not the case forever, basically. It might look good right now, but I'm hoping in the future it won't be. Also, I think there's a perception that defenders haven't been worth the money so far, and I'm not sure that's true. So take Trent, for example. He's on 44 points, and he has blanked the last 2 games, but Chelsea at home, Arsenal away, I'm not sure we should have expected too many points anyway. Attacking-wise, he's only got 1 assist so far, but his attacking numbers over the season have been good. 0.39 expected goal involvement per 90 is decent. He's also on 5 clean sheets in the first 9 games. Like 44 points for 7 million is not that bad. If you compare it to midfielders, for example, the only players that are higher are Bowen, Maddison, Madueke, McNeil, Luis Diaz, Saka, Mbeumo, Palmer, and Salah. Now, Salah, Palmer, Saka, absolutely, right? They're going to beat Trent all season. They're also a lot more money. Mbeumo is incredible, right? So you definitely want him in. Luis Diaz, I don't think anyone's buying him right now. McNeil has done great, but I find it really hard to believe that he will keep up this level of consistency for the whole season. Madueke is fine. He keeps getting starts, but the returns after that hat-trick in Game Week 2 are 1 assist and 1 goal. That's it, right? So again, he's not seeing massive investment right now. We've just spoken about James Maddison. No one wants to bring him in at the moment. And then with Bowen, he could be a good long-term option. I think he will, right? He's generally pretty consistent. And he's 7.4, so he's a bit more expensive than Trent. Everyone else has got less points. Now, some of those players are much cheaper, right? So value-wise, they could be good. But the point I'm trying to make is, I think there's a perception that the defenders aren't consistent, when actually they kind of have been. And it's the same with like Van Dijk, 6.1 million, 45 points. Gabriel, who hasn't got a clean sheet in 5 games, is still on 41 points for 6.3 million. And so if you think they will remain consistent long term, I think I'd rather back them than midfielders in and around the same price. Also, it's about what slots they take up. So you'd probably, maybe you'd prefer to have, let's say you prefer Bowen to Trent, but he's got to take up a midfield spot at a time when you're trying to fit in a bunch of premiums. So ideally right now, if I could, I would have Palmer, Saka, and Salah, and I'd probably ditch Haaland to do that, right? And I don't want to get rid of Mbeumo either. So let's say I've got that midfield, and I think if anyone's wildcarding this week, I think a lot of people will go for this midfield. Rodgers, Salah, Mbeumo, Saka, Palmer. So even if you thought like a Bowen or a Madueke was going to do better than Trent, where do they fit in? They don't. You don't have the midfield spots to put them in. You do have the defender spots to put in a Trent over a Colwell or a Gabriel, Saliba, Vardiol, Porro, whoever it is, over a cheapie like Pinnock, for example, if you're willing to sell Haaland. If you're not, then just forget about premium defence. So I think they have their place, but I don't think it's a case of you have to have big at the back right now. That's the only way to play, because it's clearly not. And the fact that we have to keep talking about this means, once again, FPL have done really well with the prices, and there's more ways to play. And I think this is really important to remember. I'm doing terrible at the moment with Haaland and no Salah, but I also don't have Palmer and Saka, so it is a pretty bad decision on my part. But other people, right, there's lots of people out there with non-Haaland drafts that are doing amazing. There's also people with Haaland that are doing really well. There's people that have still got Trent, Gabriel, and Raya that are doing great. There's people like me that have got all 3 and are not doing great. There's so many ways to play. The biggest takeaway for me would be, you don't need to, if you've not got a wild card, you don't need to rip up your team to go in any kind of different direction. If you're on cheap defence, you don't need to rip up your team to get big at the back. If you're on big at the back, there's not a mad rush to get off it to go and load up on loads of attackers. Make the moves you want to make. If you've got a bunch of transfers and you want to move funds around, that's fine. But as long as you've got your key players in, which are mostly going to be the premium attackers, everything else eventually will hopefully handle itself. So I think it's going to be worth the money. That's the bet that I'm willing to place, but I could be wrong. As you've seen, I've been wrong about a lot of stuff so far this year. I say that every season. I'm not going to get everything right, and I could be wrong about this. And if Gabriel ends up getting ruled out for a long time, well, all of a sudden that Arsenal defence is a bit weaker and I'd be less confident on backing them. Like if Arteta came out and said Gabriel's out for 2-3 months, I'd probably sell him to Ain't Nuri and start using that money in attack and maybe keep Haaland. So decide where you want to make your sacrifice in terms of money, but also where you're willing to sacrifice in terms of actual slots taken up in your team. Because I think right now, not many people are going to be wanting to put a Bowen or a Maddison or a Madueke or a Smith Rowe ahead of Salah, Saka, and Palmer, just so they can spend that money elsewhere or whatever. But like I said, I'm just rambling now. There's lots of different ways to build your team. My probable aim is going to be to go without Haaland and keep that money in defence. Because if I don't want the money in defence, by the way, I just keep Haaland. Anyway, I'm just talking nonsense at this point. I'm going to leave it there. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Rate 5 stars if you listen on podcasts. Make sure to check out Fantasy Football Hub. Links in the description below. 7-day free trial to try out all of their tools and 30% off as well. Pretty good deal. Anyway, I'll catch you tomorrow for team selection, where I'll talk about why I'm probably keeping Big at the back and selling Haaland all over again. But I'll show you my plans in a bit more detail. Thanks for watching. Catch you again tomorrow.